AI started 10 years ago. But I would like to start a little bit further back as to why I got into this space at all. I am a mom of 6 children, so that usually gets me attention. Yeah, right? And again, I didn't deepfake any of them, like they're all super real kiddos. But my first pregnancy, my very first pregnancy, I ended up in the hospital, had a baby, he was a week late, all is good though. But then the doctor whisks him off to the intensive care unit, and then he comes back in with another doctor, and they let us know that he had been diagnosed, this is now 19 years ago, but he was diagnosed with this condition known as Down syndrome. And I was a first-time mom. I've now done it a few times, so I get it. But at the time, I was like, wait, what? And I remember at that time, he must have looked at my face and been like, don't worry. You don't have to you actually don't have to go into moms like this today. There are people waiting in the hospital who will happily take your child. There's institutions that can raise your child. There's also families waiting right now to take him. And he gave me advice. You really want to protect your child from the world. I now understand what he meant. But back then I was like, first, I'm a Latina, and my brother would have hit me with a shoe if I did not come home with my baby. So that wasn't an option. But number 2, I'm a technologist. I got involved in technology the first time the world was going to end. Y2K, do y'all remember? So I already knew tech was a pretty interesting opportunity, so I started climbing the ladder, if you will, in technology. I was an engineer. I learned small talk back in the day. That became Java. I spent 12 years at IBM building Java applications and training other engineers to do the same. But all of a sudden, I got excited about cloud. I went to VMware, where virtualization was just becoming a thing. I then ended up at AWS as a principal cloud architect. And then I happened to be sitting at my desk at Amazon in Seattle, and I get an email from Jeff Bezos. And it wasn't from him per se, it was like his team, but whatever. I felt like he was speaking to me in this email, and he said, I want to build the Star Trek computer. And this was in 2013, and I was like, I want to build the Star Trek computer. And so I jumped at the opportunity to become part of that team. I was employee 10 on Amazon Alexa, and I helped productize that product. I spent 4 years there, which is like getting an MBA. So I would say I got my MBA at Amazon. And then from there, though, I was recruited by Microsoft to help launch 17 research models into production. And it was because of the productization experience I had with Alexa that made me uniquely qualified to do this. But it was all sorts of models, and every one of them, this is why I have this little guy here, his name is Bruiser. Every one of them, when I went to Microsoft, was like a little baby tiger. Everyone loved the idea of these models. There was a small little team that was like, this is an amazing little baby model, we can use it. We were getting about 100 inferences a month into these baby tigers, 17. There were way more of those. Those were just the ones I was responsible for. But what no one was asking at the time, that I had learned the hard way at Alexa, is that these models get big. And no one's asking like, hey baby tiger, look at those paws, like how big are you going to be? Or razor sharp teeth, what are you gonna eat for dinner? Or ever? How much are you gonna eat? How long are you gonna live? Where are you gonna need to stay? Like what's your house gonna look like? I got a COVID skill of adopting cats. It was not intentional, this is just what happened. And so we now have 3. They came in bundles. But when I went to go adopt a cat, do you know if any of you are rescuers that they interview you? I did not know this. But they hardcore interview you. They ask you like, well, are you going to declaw it? Where is it going to live? Where are you going to feed it? Will it have its own room? What happens when you get a new job? And I would look at them and be like, is this cat now homeless? And I don't understand the questioning. And it then dawned on me, as a data scientist, no one ever asked me questions like that when I deployed a model. Ever. They never asked me, do you know how big this might be? Do you know what the worst thing is that can happen? Where are you going to keep it? How much data are you going to need? No one thinks about these things because we're in this like baby tiger mode where we're like, this is exciting. So I got very passionate about being that person in the room that would ask hard questions. So that's the first thing I'll educate you on today is the most important person you can be on the team is the one who asks. Number 1, where did this come from? Any answer you get from any model or any vendor, where did you get that? Where did it come from? It came from somewhere, and you should know where its origination is. It's how we protect the lineage of the data we use in these systems without lineage gets lost very quickly. The encourage you to think about asking is, what's the worst thing that can happen? Now, granted, they may call you a buzzkill when you say these things, or Debbie Downer, or whatever the male version of that is, or negative Nancy. Real stories, like people were very rude when I said this. As a matter of fact, at Amazon, I would walk into the room and they'd be like, who invited Noelle? Because I was the one who was like, let's just think about this for a second. Have we thought about a model maybe that supports kids who can't speak very clearly? My son. Or supports people with traumatic brain injuries? My dad. Like, I was constantly looking through the lens of my personal lived experience and how to make these models better. And I don't know if you know this, when we started Alexa, it was built for a very specific persona. This persona was called DIGS. Do you know this term? Like, I think I breezed through it maybe briefly at one point in my life, but it's like dual income, no kids. Lots of money, not kids to worry about, so you spend it on things like voice devices. So we targeted that audience and we built for them. Here's one of the things that I learned in those early days is that when you build for a persona in an AI model, if you do it right, those personas won't mean anything because you will immediately expand past that persona as soon as you go to market. So that means you need to have a team that is expanding your understanding of who will use your system. And this can be an internal model, this can be an externally, like B2C, B2B, doesn't really matter. The concept today that we use, I was part of, I recently got for the fourth time, Microsoft's MVP in AI. This year, they created a new category, because we'll see, once we're friends on LinkedIn, we shall be friends. If we're friends on LinkedIn, my algorithm will just sprinkle you with all the things that I try to do. But I am consistently talking to people about like, what happens to models when they grow up. And one thing that you can use to hedge yourself against these challenges is to build what we call an AI red team. Now I say that like it's a noun, but really it's a verb. We need people who act as a red teaming effort within your organization to protect you. The reason this is, some of you might be familiar with cybersecurity red teaming concept, right? So that is a team, typically they're ethical hackers that are like feeding on your system to make it break, so you can be like, oh, this system's vulnerable, you need to fix that. In AI, it is all of that, but then it's also how do you make sure this model, I mean, we've heard all the speakers talk about responsibility, fairness, transparency, explainability. The fun fact about that is that data scientists are not the best at understanding the bias that might be in their system because they probably don't even know what to look for. In a large language model, it's a very specific way you might say something that'll trigger a model to behave differently. And if you don't talk that way, or even know how the people who are going to use it will talk, you will never get to evoke that behavior out of the model. So these red teams are not just adversarial attackers, they're what we call benign attackers. They're people that understand how to phrase things in very different ways from their own lived experience, from their own domain expertise to say, this is probably what someone's going to say, and the model may not or might behave accordingly. Now, last year I got, I don't know if it was lucky, I feel pretty lucky in my career. I worked at IBM, Amazon, Microsoft, Accenture. Last year I got an opportunity to join the Accenture team. There was a brand new person just got promoted to run all of data and AI, and they were a data person. By the way, all of your friends who are data people are likely unwillingly going to be asked to also become AI people. And they're not the same people, by the way. So if you are an AI person, be their friend, like help them out. And that's exactly what I attempted to do. Is I said, sure, I'll be your AI person. So I came in to run global AI solutions for Accenture. That was in November of 2022. Anyone remember what happened that month? Like this thing came out, this piece of software. I love the idea of ChatGPT because it was 7 years in the making. I was, because I'm an MVP for Microsoft, I was invited to be the beta tester on Copilot, what was called that, during COVID. And none of us had, as MVPs, much to do because mostly what we do is talk on stage in boardrooms, we do a lot of teaching, we do a lot of advocacy. And so during COVID, we're like twiddling our thumbs and like, hey, we got a new model you can test, and it ended up being for OpenAI. And so in doing that, I joined Accenture. I'm like, well, we should probably learn about this OpenAI stuff that I've been working on for the last year. And I remember saying we could build an entire practice around it. And they looked at me and said, I really don't think we can. Like, no one's going to buy generative AI. As we know from the people who already been on stage, like there are companies now that definitely sell it. But at this time, everyone's saying you can't do that. Here's another point to just remember: when you're doing something good or cool or world changing, everyone will tell you it's not possible. Everyone will come out and be like, well, my grandma tried that and it didn't work. Or oh yeah, we had that conversation 4 years ago. Like today, I can literally go into a company and completely build their entire enterprise architecture in less than a year and make it better than what took them 20 years to create, leveraging this technology. How many companies are willing to do basket turnover and do that? Not very many, but there are. So at Accenture, I got a chance to start talking to companies, and this is what I'm here to share with you today. So we're going to open it up for any questions or commentary on your experiences as well. But I got an opportunity to start just going to clients because they said, you can't do that, you can't sell it. I'm like, well, then you wouldn't mind if I just have a couple conversations. And they were like, yeah, go for it. So I did. And I went to Bank of America and John Deere and Caterpillar because I do like industrial, like smart industrial. It's fascinating to me. Agriculture, our food. I went to Winfield United, which is the Dairy Farmers of America. I went to the, what was it called? Adhesive and sealant convention and spoke to a bunch of companies building polymers. By the way, AI is heavily infused in the polymers and creating adhesives. And you'd be surprised, everything from Post-its to diapers to, I mean, you name it. So I wanted to be part of these systems because everyone is building. And now people are going to be using AI and they won't even know what they're using. So I started this campaign, if you will. I go in and I talk to all these companies. I do about 300 conversations. In those 300 conversations, we got 35 companies to say they were willing to build. In 9 months, we made $300 million for the company. 300 million on products that didn't exist when we started. Like, this is the world we're in right now. Needless to say, by the end of that, they were like, okay, so maybe you can sell this stuff. Yeah, maybe we can. But the most important thing, I was at Accenture, right? So we didn't sell the product. We sold the services. We can't do that anymore. I don't work for Accenture anymore because I was like, wait, if I can make $300 million a year, I'd be happy to take $30 million for myself. so I decided to go back to a company I had started in 2016 and launch an education and implementation company called the AI Leadership Institute. But during last year, I got very interesting, good education. For those of you who want to see these use cases I'm about to talk about, you can come over, I'll open up my computer, I'll either send you the deck or take pictures. But last year in December, the IDC released a study on the projects. I was 35 of the 140 projects that was studied during this time. And so I knew this truth before the study came out, but I was happy when it came out because now when I say IDC said it, more people are like, oh, maybe that's true. As opposed to Noelle just saying she did cool stuff. So IDC did this research. They found out now that there are, when you build in a very specific way, we call the responsible AI standard. Everyone who's spoken so far talks about this. When you build into a responsible AI standard, for every dollar you put into a project, you get $3 back. Conservative, like consistent. Here's the magic. There are also a set of use cases in a specific part of your business that if you put $1 in, you get $8 back. So when people actually pull me aside and go, no, for real, I have to make $300 million, I'm like, I only focused on use cases that I knew would get me an 800x return. And some of them did even better than that. But I wanted to say to a company, we give me $1 million, I'll give you $8 million back. And we did it consistently. And then that number just kept growing over time. I think we did a $10 million project. Anyway, I won't tell you all the details, but we did very well because we knew what worked. And none of them were super fancy, change the world AI solutions. They were like what I now call help the helpers. We would go into organizations like call centers, and we would say, how much does it cost to run a call center? Okay, great. I'm going to build 9 different models. Today they're condensed probably to 3, but I'm going to build 9 models for you that are going to decrease the cost of owning this call center by 20%. Super conservative, right? I'm saying there's now use cases that give you 300% return. So I say 20%. And then I tell them, if I can get you a 20% return on this, will you give me half of that money back to invest in the next project? And they all were like, sure, because they didn't believe we would do it. They're like, sure, no problem. Value-based pricing, for those of you on the business side, of selling these technologies. So we did value-based pricing. Obviously, we didn't just do 20%. We did at least 100%, most of the time in the 500 to 600% growth. And we took half of that money, sometimes $300 million. We took half of that money and we said, great, let's create a roadmap for us to build additional features. I will tell you the world is different though. In the last few years, as I've been building and selling AI solutions, one of the biggest things I learned is that you can no longer sell these like golden days of like 300, or let's say $3 million, $5 million, $10 million deals. I sell $10 million deals 100K at a time. And that means that I deliver results and value incrementally, consistently to all of these clients. And that's why they kept giving us more money. The days of selling a box on a shelf that people don't understand, unfortunately, are coming to an end, if not already over. At Microsoft, in 2018, I sold $1 billion in Microsoft AI. It was a box on the shelf that no one understood. And 3 years later, I get the chance now, I'm like, at Accenture, I go back to my clients, and I'm like, how'd that go? They're like, yeah, we bought this consumption, but we didn't really know what it was, and we never used it. Never used it. So we're in a different place now. Maybe it's my own personal belief that I want them to use it. I want them to get money. I want them to save time and then use the value that they generated to invest in more stuff. And that way, guess what? You get to be in the business of generating AI systems that are self-funding. Like, that is a business model almost every CEO I've talked to across the Fortune 500 have gotten very interested. And it works. The problem, though, is it requires discipline. It requires people who are laser focused on excellent delivery and operational excellence. Things I all learned at Amazon, things that not every company is great at. So it puts the burden on you as the deliverer to deliver well so you can get that next check. And I actually think it's great because it forces people better. But I wanted to share with you the 3 questions. So I of course, use Microsoft products. Viva Insights got very good recently. And in Viva Insights, you can actually have it transcribe all your meetings. Some of you know this, Copilot, right? You can transcribe your meetings. But you can also ask it what the themes were for the meetings that you were in, and also what the top 3 questions that were asked. Now, sometimes it gives you garbage because a lot of people ask garbage questions. But after a little bit of, massaging, data science, right? I was able to uncover the top 3 questions every executive asked me. So I'm going to give those to you. And then, if any of these trigger a question or provoke a question, please be willing to jump in. So first one, how do I not get fired implementing this stuff? That can be translated to how do you build safely and responsibly? But that's like what IBC will say versus what a CEO actually said. I remember I was talking to the CTO of Comcast, and that literally we walk in, we haven't even sat down, he's like, I just want to make sure that I'm not going to hurt my business. I mean, Comcast, all telecoms, I'm actually the keynote at Sonos next week, which is the telecom conference of the world. And all of these CEOs are like, how do we use this and not make things worse? Because you can't, I don't know if you know about these models, they can definitely make things worse, especially if you're not careful and you don't understand them. So we decided, of course, we're like, absolutely. The number one thing people struggle with was creating policies. We call it kind of shadow IT, right, where anyone can build a model or use a model in their company and they don't know how to be used. So we decided the best thing you can do as a company is to create an internal sandbox, right? An internal GPT, call it the name of your company, Delta Airlines.GPT, or DAL, down, as they like to call it, right? You create an internal GPT, and then you tell everyone in the company, if you're using a generative model, look up the URL and never say our name. And all of a sudden, a bunch of challenges go away because now it's grounded in your, at least in your tenant, whatever that is, whether it's AWS, Microsoft, or Google. Now, that is the first step. This is a whole rubric, but I'm giving you just a taste of like things you should go look into. Is how do you create policies in this company that are not 10 pages long and 6 weeks of discovery? How do you walk into a company and say, if you do this one thing, you'll be safer? And now they're going to say, okay, great, what else do you have? That's literally how I do all. That's how I built the business that I have now. The second question is a little more complicated. It's the rubric for picking the right use case for an LLM. And again, this has evolved over time. This is validated. I'm a big fan of Stanford, especially their human-centered AI organization. So this is grounded in their research, but validated by the work we did last year. And the first thing we realized, which may surprise you, is that you have to have a very clear, like super intense clarity on your core values as an organization. If you do not know what your core values are as an organization, they will seep into your models whether you know it or not. I remember one of my friends just posted on LinkedIn, she said, you're going to write an AI strategy whether you do it intentionally or not. It's better to be intentional, but no matter what, like your strategy will get known. I have a Google alert for AI gone wrong. You should do it, it's not for everyone. But it shows you production failures of AI. It'll just bubble up these news, press cycles. It's massive. There's so many, it's really sad. It's a good client opportunity for many of you here. But the challenge is that oftentimes, and this happened during COVID, we're building models. We think they're awesome. We go deploy them, and maybe they're not great. So Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta, and one other I always forget. Somebody might know. But there was a research study that was done on a computer vision facial recognition model. Remember this? It was like right in the middle of COVID. And they called out these models to say you can't see people of color, so you need to fix that. And what that means is you have to go collect facial data on dominant people, which by the way, if you don't do it the first time, they're super resistant to doing it the second time. When you're like going to be like, so Misty, so can we get a picture? Like, not no way. So what we ended up finding is that 3 companies just bowed out. I don't know if you remember this, but Amazon shut down their facial recognition model. Meta shut down their facial recognition model. The only ones left standing were Microsoft and Google. Anyway, I'll just talk about Microsoft. But the reason they didn't do it is because they didn't care about it. Like, it was not critical to their business. It wasn't a core value. It didn't deliver any unique value to them. So it was just like billions of dollars. It's fine. Let's just not worry about it. Microsoft, though, is keyed in on responsible AI. They're one of the biggest proponents of it in our industry. So obviously they were like, well, we're going to stick this out and buy more data. It is more expensive to build good AI. It takes longer. It's harder. But those models will scale. Now, remember those baby tigers that I got to raise? Today, those models get between 5 and 7 billion inferences a month. And it's the same model, right? We've evolved it a little bit over time. But you know how much better we are now because we thought differently at the beginning? And I just tell everyone's a baby tiger right now. You have no idea how yours is going to grow up. So just build it as if it's going to be the unicorn. You want it to be anyway. So as if it's going to eventually serve 500 million houses or billions of inferences. So the second part, so you have to have your core values locked in. You have to understand the risk for your organization. This, in regulated industries, can be compliance or regulatory requirements, but really it's just what's risky to you. Anything that's risky, don't do. There's plenty of use cases that you can do. The third part of that, which is probably my favorite, is complexity. Lots of people go over, because we're smart people and we want to solve hard problems, but the world will change by us implementing not super complex data science solutions, but solutions that are desperately needed by a company. So I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we brought in 9 data scientists from MIT and the curators from the Met, and we sat them in a room for a hackathon, and it was like an awkward high school dance. Like, they didn't want to talk to each other. They were like, I remember the curators being like, I think we're pretty good, but you guys go ahead. We got everything we need. And it wasn't until the end of day 1 that they started asking questions like, what hurts you every day? How can we help you? Like, we don't want to build something new. They were very worried about generative art. Because they were like, no, humans do this. Machines don't do this. They evolved, but this was a problem at the time. So that was a risk for us, so we didn't do that. We were like, what hurts you? Guess what the thing that hurt them the most was? Tagging. Tagging art. They have 6,000 years of art and 29 curators. They just can't tag it all. And worse, the people that tag it don't know the art, except they would tag a vase and oops, it's an urn. Or they would tag a tree and it's the spiritual representation in Australia. Like, they didn't know. So they would just tag it incorrectly where an AI became super helpful. So the moral of that story is like, you want to make sure that you identify what is painful to the person you're building for. I have a philosophy, never build for us without us. It's an accessibility philosophy, meaning never build a blind app for somebody who's blind unless you have someone blind building with you. But I now realize it's for everyone. Never build for anyone without those people being represented on your team. That's what red teams offer, is the ability to host them. The last one is probably the most important, and it's workforce enablement. Everyone in the world, like it's on Good Morning America, I was featured on Good Morning America, Good Morning New Zealand, and what was it? Sky News in Sydney, Australia. So I'm on all these morning shows talking to people who don't know anything about it. And they are now going into the workplace and being like, I can probably use this. Everyone everyone needs to generate, like, be given the opportunity to become literate in this technology. And you'd be surprised that people can sometimes, I don't know, as a data scientist, I'm like, oh, that's pretty hard. I don't know if you want to know all those details. But when you build it in the context of the work they do every day, and you give them the insight that it's going to relieve them of doing monotonous, ridiculous, drudgery work, they get very interested in how it works. So we shouldn't make any assumptions about our audience, but we should give them the right and capability to learn. And so those ended up being the 3 questions. The workforce one sounded a little bit different. The CEO would say, if I get 150,000 man hours back, which is a lot of FTEs, should I just get rid of those FTEs? And do you remember last year, a bunch of companies never asked the question, they just got rid of FTEs. What we now know, the data has shown, is when you get rid of FTEs like that, you are cutting into the muscle of your organization that will have scale in the most prosperous time our entire world, society has ever seen with this technology. But only if you use those humans to minimize the work AI is good at and maximize human value, like relationships, selling, customer success. Like, these are the types of things that bring more revenue to a company. Everyone has customers. Everyone needs to take care of it better, and humans are great at that. Study came out maybe not the second last thing I'll mention. A study came out from RIT, Rochester, and they did a study on how humans like to communicate or be communicated to by robots. And we use this information at a very popular level. The study said that humans would prefer to get negative information or corrective information from a robot and would prefer to get positive or praise information from a human. And if you build, and I took this to heart, it came out last summer, took it to heart and started building our systems this way. For an airline we built, and you'll know this for some if you know this airline, they moved all of their regular operations, meaning delays, cancellations, flight changes, everything comes to you digital first. Everything. Here's the magic of what happened in this scenario. Everything goes digital first through a tool. It might be a chatbot, it might be a text message. They get it virtually first. Their customer satisfaction has gone up, but so has their irregular operations, which is bizarre. Meaning they're doing a worse job running their airline, but their customers are happier with the airline. It's fascinating. Like, thank you, data science. So it's very cool that what you can think about when you combine the machine and the human, and you index on how do we make the humans happier, whether it's make our customers happier, whether it's make our employees happier, or whether it's make the world better. I think that is the 3. Oh, the last question. Oh, no, I talked about workforce. So I think that's it. So I want to open it up to see if anyone has questions or comments. If not, I'll share with you a cool 2 projects that I'm working on right now. Any questions, comments? No? Okay. You just want to hear my cool project. All right, so I'm going to tell you one. It's called Justice GPT. So I got an idea. I wanted to build an AI model that would help people. I don't know if you know, but in Miami, not everybody speaks English. And if you get pulled over, you don't know what's going to happen. So I wanted to create an app that allows you to press a button and just record the conversation, but in real time, transcribe that conversation, and be able to give you advice on what to do. I don't know, I'm from Miami. I was raised in Homestead, Florida. I then went to Seattle to do my tech stuff. I now live in Weston, Fort Lauderdale area. But we have a football team, Miami Dolphins. Anyway, and Tyreek Hill, right? Anyway, I won't go into it. If you don't know the story, you don't need to know. And now, unfortunately, if you have Instagram on your phone, it hurt me, so you're going to see it. But Tyreek Hill got pulled over for speeding and ended up kneeing his back on the ground. It was awful. And of course, what that does is it's bad that that happened to him. But what it does is it raises the level of anxiety for anyone in that situation that gets pulled over for So we created this app. But it went beyond that because now we found out that people were getting incarcerated from those engagements and they didn't know the language, so they never could get out of it. Not only did they get incarcerated, they didn't spend time there, like 5 years in prison for things that they don't understand. It is crazy talk. I broke down a little bit when I heard this woman tell her story. I was like, what? It's a disaster. So I wanted to build a model that would help people who could not help themselves. And so we built this application. We used a large language model. It actually became known as a large advocacy model. It's leveraged by Dream.org. And we're building this model. But again, remember, one of the riskiest things is for me to get in the middle of a conversation with a police officer. So we don't do that. We instead create content that someone who witnesses something or someone who's worried about something can go to ahead of time. And we did deploy it, by the way. We did sample taking live feeds, but the risk is too high. So now we help the agents that are taking those calls at Trade Delaware. And it's now pivoted, strangely, to prison incidents. I don't know if you know this, but Rikers Island, for example, mistreats their prisoners at the highest rate in the U.S. However, the only mechanism you have is to complain to the warden. And if you, as a prisoner, complain to the warden, can you imagine what happens to you as a prisoner who complains that they're getting treated roughly? And these are not, like, there are people who deserve to be in prison. And I actually just as impacted someone who worked with myself and my family is in prison for 8 years. So I get that there are people that deserve to be there, and sometimes I'm like, it's okay to keep that one, like keep that guy. But there are lots of people that are in for crimes either like non-violent crimes or crimes that they've been in for 10 or 15 years, and they have no idea what to do or how to get help. So that's what we built. That's a little like dark. So I'm going to go to a happier solution. I just got off the phone this morning with Sesame Street, and they want to build an app. It's Suicide Prevention Month. I don't know if you know this. Talk to a friend. You don't have to talk to them about suicide. Just actually talk to people. This is a huge help in the world. But we wanted to build a robot, basically that would allow you to communicate to some of your favorite characters. Abby Cadabby. I mean, just listen to some of these things. Like, imagine Cookie Monster becoming the mindful muncher, right? He still loves cookies, but he understands that there's some things you don't need to eat a lot of. He loves cookies, but he's going to talk about like what it means to be mindful about what you eat. I think it's awesome. And then, of course, the model will learn each individual child. And so we're in the early stages. We built out 6 draft LLM models, one for Abby Cadabby, which is the Curious Explorer. So all these different models for different characters. And we've got a bunch of kids, my kids, and other parents of developers that are testing. And it's all about mental health. It's like, how do we give a child a safe place to talk, especially if their house, which sadly, lots of houses aren't safe to share what they're worried about, what they're concerned about. Even me, when I see some weird behavior of my child, my instinct is like, why are you acting like that? Instead of like, oh, well, like who hurt you? Like why, instead of immediately realizing that any behavior like that often stems from fear or like nervousness or anxiety. And so we'll educate not just the kids, but also the parents. We're COPA compliant, HIPAA compliant. So it was a fun conversation. But those are like active conversations that are happening now. That's how I know the world has changed. Because nonprofits are garnering massive funding to do these projects, where 2 years ago that was not happening. And usually nonprofits are laggards in the space of investing. They're going all in. So customers, I think, if presented with the right opportunity, the right research-backed success, like this research is public. Everything I shared with you, you do Google or go to Harvard or MIT or Stanford and download research so you can say for the logical buyer, this is why you're doing what we do. And then for the emotional buyer, know the AI gone wrong stories. Like know that it can work well, but it often doesn't. Be a storyteller. We are storytellers. As data scientists, we're storytellers. We're some of the best. We tell it in a different way. Yes, great. Thank you. Question. See, she knew that I wouldn't stop talking unless somebody asked a question. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Yes.
So, quick question around storytelling actually. When working with end users or customers who are not very familiar with AI, they haven't used it too much, I'm curious to know, storytelling, branding angle, have you found it more useful to lead with AI because of the excitement around it? Maybe it's an AI-powered feature, AI-powered tool, or do you almost find the opposite where because it's something unknown to them, it might almost be scary or more off-putting to lead with that, so you lead more with the use case, the end product. I'm curious to know what you do.
Yes, so for those of you who couldn't hear, the question was, when you're going in and having a sales conversation or an opportunity conversation, do you lean more towards the hype of AI to get them excited, or do you lean away from that because that might trigger a fear? And I will say, consistently, people are always scared when I talk to them. They're already worried about the worst things that can happen. It doesn't mean I don't lead with AI, but I don't lead with AI. I lead with personal stories about how AI has solved problems. And AI is almost this like like they need it, they're like, oh my gosh, that'd be cool. Now, I will tell you, there's a term I have in my mind, criers aren't buyers. But sometimes I've gotten executives in a boardroom to get super teared up because I would show them a use case that was so impactful to like especially in the nonprofit space, where I'm like, this is what children, like I would say, imagine a time when your children are this way, when your customers are this happy, when you're, like, and then I back it up with real use cases of how we've already done it. And it doesn't have to be you. You just have to know that it happened. Microsoft is very forthcoming with the projects that they've done. And I don't know if you know this, but Google, Amazon, and Microsoft all now publish solution playbooks on GitHub. Like literally the ones we used in our projects last year are on GitHub, so you can recreate those projects. And for those of you like in transition or consultants, like go build those. I built hundreds of them before we actually built for clients. So that is another fun fact. But yeah, I don't lead with AI like the hype cycle. I kind of lead with usually I lead with my son, my dad, or again like dairy farmers. I led with like the challenge they have with crop protection and the fact that they are really struggling to understand if a crop is going to be damaged by pesticide or anything. They can't tell until it's too late, until they've already ruined the whole crop. And so I would tell them like, wouldn't it be great if you could solve that problem? And then AI is of course a solution. And I'm always very transparent that AI is not, like it's not the hammer and everything's a nail and you're like, oh, like no, we're going to be thoughtful about it. But it's been very hard for the last 2 years to not go out the door with an incremental solution that is AI, meaning generative AI driven. Because I can do something in 6 weeks and show value. I can't do that with a model that I require data and training. And not because I can't build it, it's also because the client won't give me their data in time. So I lose like 6 months waiting for the red tape to fall so I get access to data sets. So generative AI gets you in the door, gets the hook. I usually sell an MVP or what I call a minimum remarkable product, and then that way goes the other ones. So that's all. Good question. Any other questions? Comments? What do you think? Do you think I'm full of it? Yes. Sorry, thank you.
So I like your analogy of the baby tiger and the big tiger. So have you been in situations where just a small tiger is enough? That you in a case where try to convince someone that a small tiger is enough, because most of them have seen the hype of OpenAI and they always think that GPT kind of models are solutions, whereas if you get the same, the smaller model, the lesser cost, and wherever you can be able to get more profit margins, how do you handle that?
Yes, so for those of you who couldn't hear, the question was around, like, when you talk to a client, like, is there a situation where you just, like a small tiger, a baby tiger is enough? And I will say, it's kind of two different things. So the size of the implementation, and more importantly, it's kind of like, do I pick a big model or a smaller model, like a fine-tuned model or a small language model as opposed to a large language model? I am a huge fan. I mean, we're moving into this world of what we call agentic AI, right? Lots of us have been talking about this for a long time. We just made this name up, and I'm like, well, I wish I had made that name up. But I and many people at Microsoft and Amazon and Google have been calling it multitask orchestration. That we build these little models to do different tasks, and then we can orchestrate those, just like we did. You guys remember back in the day, business process automation, like when we orchestrate tasks. So I absolutely think that companies will build small models. However, the bigness is not in the size of the model, but in the impact to the user. So what you want to think is like, I'm using this data, will this data hurt my user? And big tigers, I would say baby tigers, right, grow to be big tigers and big tigers kill people. And it's not a fun thing to say, but it's important to kind of remember that these models, even if they're a small language model, they can hurt the audience, the very audience you're trying to help. They can accidentally, I mean, I'll tell you, I just did, I was showing a friend of mine I just met, I did Insta headshots, and with that, it's a generative model that takes 10 to 15 pictures of you and it generates Insta headshots. They're not terrible, except that a third of the pictures have big gold earrings. I don't wear gold earrings, but I guess like the ancient knowledge of the model, thinking on Boricua from New York, was like, you need J-Lo earrings. And so and it was just shocking to me that with no guidance, and I no one, but it is literally what has made or broken every production model that we have deployed, including Alexa. At Alexa, it was all data science at first. We launched it into the world. Zero user experience design work was really done. And our customers told us what was wrong, which is not good. Like, we went to Reddit on a daily basis to find out how Alexa was failing. I encourage you not to find your product response and data about how your customers on Reddit. Like, that's a bad idea. Instead, befriend a UX designer, because they can tell you ahead of time, you know your users are going to hate them. Or, wow, if you do this one little thing, it'll reach more people. It'll be more accessible. So I think that is a big part of it. I think maybe we have time for one more. Okay, great. And then we'll
As a follow-up from what you're saying, it is kind of those things you have to test the users. But what would be the cost to follow that?
yes, so the question was, oftentimes a UX designer, yes, will guide you to test with real people, users. So remember this AI red team? Definitely go look it up. There is documentation. Google has publicly, unlikely Google, but they've disclosed how they do their own red teaming. Microsoft has also created an AI red teaming toolkit for you, but it's your ability to create an ecosystem of testers that are not just your customers, but it's your entire ecosystem. So your customers, your partners, everyone. And anyone you can think of, honestly. And I always tell companies, start with your employees. Your employees are a really good representation, especially employees that are customer facing. That's a kind of cheat code for getting really decent user testers early in the process. But yes, so build a team and then have those people dedicated to the testing forever. Thanks for having me. I hope you enjoyed this session. It's my pleasure.